Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks to Literary Arts and to the Portland Art Museum. My name is Allison deFreese, and I'm a literary translator. And I have had the pleasure recently to begin collaborating with Ivonne Saed, who I met through an event at the Oregon Society of Translators and Interpreters a few years ago, on the translation of her experimental and moving novel about 3 generations of women of Syrian descent living in Mexico City. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Allison. And I also want to thank Literary Arts, the Portland Book Festival, and I am so glad to be here again in the Portland Art Museum, this time in a virtual way, which is interesting. But anyway, I'm really glad to be here again. And my name is Ivonne Saed. I have participated before in the Portland Book Festival with Los Porteños. And this time, I had this opportunity of talking about my novel, CRÓNICA de un Nombre, which is a novel that I wrote in Spanish several years ago. And now I am having the great opportunity to get it translated by Allison deFreese, which is going to read a section of her translation here today. So the way we decided to do this is just, I know a lot of people who are listening to this won't understand very well my reading in Spanish, but we wanted to give it a little like of the flavor of the rhythm of the novel. So I will read a short section of the last chapter of the book, and Allison will start reading right after that, her translation into English. So here it goes. Aprovechando que por el embarazo rechacé la última propuesta de dirección, he podido dedicarme a los típicos pendientes que uno puede dejar sin atender por años. Desde que dejé la fotografía por el cine, hay un sector de mi librero al que no me acerco por temor a que la montaña de fotos desparramadas haga erupción como un volcán y me aplaste al intentar tomar una sola. Durante toda mi carrera de fotógrafa, siempre aspiré a poder combinar esa actividad con la dirección cinematográfica, pero solamente hace 8 años pude realizarlo. Lo malo es que una vez que se ingresa en el mundo de las películas, es prácticamente imposible dedicarse a cualquier otra cosa durante el tiempo de la producción. Eso no quiere decir que he abandonado la cámara en absoluto. Mis caprichos están siempre detrás del director de fotografía y sus camarógrafos. Además de que en los rodajes siempre estoy con la cámara al cuello, registrando cuanto puedo dentro y fuera de escena. Pero esto, de alguna manera, no es fotografía pura. Es más bien un apéndice al servicio de la película. Es como una bitácora gráfica del viaje que el filme representa en la vida de toda la gente que participa en él. Y es que, en efecto, un viaje remoto es la mejor descripción que se puede dar a un rodaje de cine. Durante la producción, la vida diaria se detiene, cada uno de los involucrados pone su propia cotidianidad y todo lo que la conforma detrás de la raya amarilla, al margen, donde ésta puede elegir si quedarse a observar o retirar con resignación hasta el día del estreno. De ahí surge el mito de la vida dispersa de la gente de cine. No es para que sea dispersa en sí misma, sino que la profesión es la que impone sus propias reglas ineludibles y cada uno de los personajes involucrados deviene en mero instrumento de producción. Y I'm going to just stop here, and Allison now will continue a section that is a little bit ahead of the same chapter, but will reveal much more of this photographer character and what she is talking about.
Thank you, Ivonne. In the section that Ivonne just read, it's from the 5th section of the book about the character Lorena. The book is Crónica de un Nombre, triple chronicle of a name and talks about the way names impact destiny. So the narrator, Lorena, is pregnant. She is a cinematographer and also a photographer. And she has just talked about how she's spending her time off of work, anticipating the birth of the child. Since I've had time recently to experience reality more fully, I've discovered many things. One is that most people do the exact same thing every day of the week for years on end without breaks, other than their 2-week vacations at the beach. This doesn't mean they're any more or less happy than anyone else, or than the few number of people who don't live this way. People like this can make plans and schedule their medium and long-range appointments with relative certainty that they will be able to keep them 1 or 4 months from now. They know the ground they tread well, whether or not they like it, because they've always walked this path, even before they were born. And they at least know they'll be ready to die after a journey where the adventure and emotion surface only by accident and rarely or never happen as ends in themselves. Another remarkable discovery came when I realized that most people interact endlessly with the same random colleagues at work and with the same family and friends at home without ever knocking on a single new door. Only their moment of contact with a stranger, their only moment of contact with a stranger is when they buy popcorn from a vendor at the movies or order food from a wait person who happens to be on duty at the restaurant. Apart from these few technical exceptions, most live within a collective oyster shell where only the chosen few who belong to their tribes may enter. For those of us who come from the other side, from the far-reaching minority, we find it strange to be walking among the oyster shells, even if they are invisible. After all, they have a clear sense of their reality, and they often feel that if they get any closer, an invisible bump on the forehead is sure to follow. All these revelations surface spontaneously as I examine the paradoxes of my life up till now, passing through an infinite series of images in order to get to where they are today, which had to make this journey from their original state as objects or subjects onto the paper or film that hold them in place. On this journey, each thing was first what it was originally, then became an ephemeral, two-dimensional composition, and at the same time, an early emotion, an intuition, then a sharply defined bolt of singular light, a luminous likeness, a molecular reaction, and at last a partial representation of reality, one viewpoint excluding others, decontextualized, a work of art, an emotion, a feeling, a treasure, a relic, or nothing at all. A visual souvenir selected at random to symbolize joy, an accomplishment, an event, cycles, once-in-a-lifetime moments, impermanent spaces and landscapes, stories locked in an instant that should have gone unnoticed, 1,000th of a second immortalized by a single click that subtracts one real image from a slow and infinite reality, giving it new significance, exposed to multiple and constant interpretations and open to the judgment of whoever sees the image in their own good time and in times yet to come. I arranged the photos according to the period in which they were taken, by social group, by theme. I separate family from friends, pictures of backlit graffiti from one film production or another. I arrange the images from each category in chronological order then, and as the days go by, at times looking at them is like a close reading from a personal diary. Thank you.
Lo mismo sucede con el cine. Al terminar cada película, es como si una parte muy preciada de uno mismo se desprendiera, debilitando cuerpo y espíritu a un grado extremo, de tal suerte que, por lo general, la gente de cine se recluye en un aislamiento absoluto durante un lapso que varía dependiendo de la personalidad de cada quien. No se trata de una depresión clínica, en ningún caso. Es más bien una especie de melancolía, de saudade, por la pérdida de algo inacible que nunca perteneció realmente a nadie. Más tarde viene la paulatina aceptación de la independencia de la película. Si ésta tiene la suerte de exhibirse en breve y es lo suficientemente exitosa como para que todos hablen de ella, el tema entra en la categoría de lugar común, de tal forma que lo que los integrantes de la producción quieren no es sino idear otra creación más interesante y que represente un desafío mayor. La depresión entonces cede el paso a las pláticas para nuevos contratos y a la lectura de guiones, larga etapa que antes o después llevará a una nueva película, a un nuevo oasis de fantasía e irrealidad que a fin de cuentas también es trabajo. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Yeah, and so Allison, why don't you say a little bit about what drew you to decide to translate my work?
Right, okay. Yes, it's a book about creation, it's a book about women, it's a book about personal freedom, and it's also a very artistic book, which makes it perfect to be talking about it here at the Portland Art Museum with Literary Arts. It's a book that talks about both creation on the reproductive level during generations and also about the creative act of making a film, photographing. It's also a book that covers a wide range of social and cultural issues. For instance, the fact that the characters come from Syria originally and have come to Mexico but still carry their traditions with them. So as the young women in the family branch out into their own careers, they are not only in an environment which allows for them to continue with their education and their dreams, but also facing expectations about what women are expected to do. And Crónica de un Nombre, triple chronicle of a name, what's expected of you with tradition and with the name you carry forward.
Yeah, and I would like to add that, yeah, as Allison was saying, so the book is like, it's like a little experiment in a way, because it's not a linear way of telling a story, and there are instances of the same character that depend on the name of the character. So basically, it really is about the name as destiny. It's like that element that comes from, even if we think about it, it goes back to biblical times when, you know, the name was considered the essence of the thing. And that was the kind of thing that I wanted to explore since I started thinking about this book that started with a short story, by the way, at some point, and then I just thought, this kind of really has so much to shred, right, that I ended up, you know, just like exploding it into a much longer narrative. And yeah, and basically, and you know, I never thought about this book as a narrative, as a feminist narrative. It was just more like a very personal preoccupation of mine, of my writing, and then I realized that I actually wrote a very feminist book. So that was an interesting thing, right? Yeah.
Right.
So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Allison, for translating my book and for joining me today, for being together in this presentation. And thanks, again, Literary Arts.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that we will continue collaborating in the future.